As always on a Monday afternoon, we'll bring in Danielle Shay, VP of Options over at Simpler Trading, to get her take on what to expect coming up in a week that we get not one, Miss Shay, but two different inflation readings. And oh yeah, the Fed coming through on Wednesday as well. We'll get to all that in a second here, but I want to start with what is moving, because one of the stocks that you brought up or brought to my attention was CRM, Salesforce. Big move down here on this AI Day event that is currently going on, started at 1:30. But back to basically support on Friday after a big move up. I mean, it seemed like we learned all the details of the news in the pre-market. Nothing really significant since then. First off, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm doing great. How are you? It's great to be back.
Fantastic. Big week ahead. We're excited for it. What are you looking at as far as CRM?
So when you're looking at Salesforce, I think this is interesting because this entire space, it's been a little bit deflated this year. Everybody's been focusing on AI, but when you look at some of these stocks, you look at Oracle and you look at Adobe. I mean, look at the way that Oracle just made a new high and Adobe's breaking out. Adobe's really doing a really good job of recovering a lot of those losses. And I think that Salesforce can do the same thing. So I think that this space is a little bit under the radar right now, but I think that it's going to really start recovering. And so when you look at Salesforce in particular, I mean, for a setup for me, I have a couple different things going on. If you start with the weekly chart and just look at the higher time frame, right? I mean, you can see the way that it's broken up above a lot of key resistance zones. Once it got through the $200 price point, I mean, after that, that was a major area of resistance for it to break. And at this point, if you go down to the daily chart and then the 4-hour chart, I really like trading 4-hour time frames because it will give you a good swing trade for a few days. Those two time frames are both consolidating. And so I think that we can see this consolidation break out to the upside. So I actually like the pullback here. I think you could trade it up into 220, 225, and then 230, watching those areas of resistance as you go higher. But I think Salesforce and the software stocks are recovering. So I'm looking forward to seeing those continue trading higher.
Yeah, it's a great point when you look at it from that sense, in that it's had a huge move, but with the news, everyone's probably taking a little bit of profit today. So nice look for Salesforce. Let's talk some Canadian content, shall we? Because you also have Shopify on your list. Why?
So when you look at Shopify is also doing a really good job recovering as well. And I like this one too, because it has the squeeze. So the squeeze is one of my favorite setups. What I do is I look for moments in time where there's consolidation in the market, especially if it's in the context of a trend. And Shopify has had pretty decent uptrend, at least over the course of the past several months, even going back to October. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's going to be at a new all-time high anytime soon, but certainly you can trade along with the trend. And when you see that consolidation on a daily chart, and a 4-hour chart, it generally is going to break out in the direction of the trend, which is what it's doing today. And so I think this one, you could get some continuation up into 68, 70 at least, and then we can see what happens when we hit that resistance.
The old favorites here. I mean, NVIDIA, it seems like everyone and anyone is talking about NVIDIA at this point. And should we buy still, even after it's done what it's done so far this year? All things given in that sense of where it's come from and where it is today, is there a possibility to do just that with NVIDIA?
I think there is. And, what I was looking at over the weekend when I was doing my research is I was trying to go back and compare, the market in 2019, 2020, and especially comparing it against the VIX. And I think one thing that we have to remember is that right now, we are seeing a VIX that hasn't been this low since before the 2020 crash. And if you go back and you remember what it was like trading in 2019 and 2020, the market just kept going up, right? Like, didn't make sense, kept going higher. There it was. But we had a really low VIX at that time, before the crash, obviously. And I think that's what we're getting back to now. So if you look at NVIDIA and you say, hey, can it still go higher? Yes, it can still go higher. And you know why? Because there's a lot of people that are betting against this market and a lot of people who keep saying it's going to crash. And so when you look at NVIDIA, You have a really nice setup on the 4-hour chart, and I like to use a 60-minute chart as well. We have, again, more consolidation in the context of that trend. Now, I'm not buying more NVIDIA stock here. Like, I bought that a while ago. I'm holding it. But as far as the trade is concerned, the semiconductors are hot. And this one, I like the price target at least at 400. I think it could go back to 420 though. I will tell you, when you're trading extended at these levels, of course, be careful, control your risk. But I like the market and I like the upside here.
Discussing the downside of some of these retail names over the past couple of weeks. There's been a number of analysts that have come out echoing the same. You had TJX on your list for this week as far as stocks to maybe give some sort of a setup. I mean, this was the one that had such a big day going back to Friday, showing some relative strength finally, but we got through that earnings period where retail stocks did not really perform well out of a few individual names. What is it specifically with TJX that you like to see?
So, the retailers have had a really tough time here, especially with a lot of boycotts. You have Target that's just completely tanking. But then you look at TJ Maxx, and I love the overall chart pattern on this chart. I mean, when I came across this, I was a little bit surprised because I was searching for, stocks that are pretty close to that previous high. I like to see stocks really within 10 to 15% of that 252 period high, or in this case, all-time high. I like to see stocks that are consolidating. And then I also like to see stocks that are increasing earnings over time. Now with TJ Maxx, not perfect, but you can see that it's just below that previous high. You're up above key moving averages on the daily chart. You have a nice little bullish trend and you have that squeeze. Whenever you have a squeeze, you have the likelihood for it to break out. So, retailers definitely heroes and zeros right now. Target, that thing is going to keep rolling, but I like TJ Maxx here.
All right, I want to get your take on, before we wrap things up, I want to get your take on what's to come this week. Obviously, a huge week for the overall market. A lot of people are going to be, it seems like anyways, a lot of people have been waiting to see what's going to happen this week specifically. The market, as we saw, we were talking about it in the pre-market this morning, right at those March highs once again, kind of banging its head against those March highs once again. If, all things come out in the right direction, CPI tomorrow and then the Fed on Wednesday, where are you going to go first and why?
So, what I'm primarily focusing on doing this week is I'm not going to have a ton of swing trades because you do have a lot of news related risk. I am going to be focusing on trading earnings. So I've got a Lennar, I have Oracle, and I have Adobe earnings that I'm going to trade. As far as the Fed is concerned, I hate to use the word hopeful, but I am hopeful because when you're looking at the way that the market is trading, when you're looking at the low VIX, I think it's reasonable that the VIX trades higher by another few points, maybe up to 17, maybe 18. But even in that case, it's still in a downtrend. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of a spike here in volatility. I wouldn't be surprised to see little bit. When the Fed comes, we always get, trade higher, trade lower. And a lot of the times we end up back at the same spot before we can really take off. So I'm looking for some near-term volatility. I'm hopeful that after the Fed actually occurs, we continue to see upwards price action because we have that low VIX. We have this nice steady market. And I don't think that the Fed is going to be as much as a shock to the market as it was months ago.
Yeah, and it seems like it's been trending in that direction. We were talking about the same sense with CPI. There was a time, when we were at 8-9% on inflation, that CPI was everything and a can't miss trade setup. But it's gotten to a point where the market kind of makes its initial move, shrugs it off, and then as you were. So yeah, big announcements to come, but will there be a big reaction remains to be seen. So we'll see how the overall week plays out. Danielle Shay, VP of Options over at Simpler Trading. A pleasure as always. Thank you.
Thank you.